And we knew that we wrote that a wave of anti-Americanism would sweep the globe and Americans wouldn't be safe at home or abroad. It was called foreign policy. But when it happens, they call the people terrorism. How about getting even? Can anybody handle that one? You want to go into another country, knock yourself out. Kill a lot of people, make a lot of enemies. You think they're going to get even with you? It's going to be the same thing with this, Eric. They're going to call it violent crimes. It's going to be called getting even. People have lost everything that they've worked for, their pensions. They've lost their savings. They've lost their futures because the criminal gang on Wall Street, they're ruthless. They rob them blind, and they're going to get even. It's going to be off with their heads. You're going to start seeing kidnappings. New York City is going to start looking like Mexico City when they go after the too rich or the too big that rob too many.
It's interesting that you say that, Gerald, because I had Dr. Rand Paul on last week, son of Congressman Ron Paul, and he said when the Romans would wake up as their country was being looted, it was off with their heads, which is the very same thing you're mentioning here.
Well, again, let's see what happens in the sense that how could people ignore history? I mean, go back to the French. And again, we're looking, by the way, our effort, and I want to make this 100% clear, is for an intellectual revolution. Let's just look at the facts and change the system. We don't want to see any violence. As a Bronx boy, my saying is when people lose everything and they have nothing left to lose, they lose it. And that's what we're concerned about. And the people in power will do anything to retain it. So we're looking for a reality check here so that people can move ahead in a situation that understands that, no, the too big to fails have to fail. I think Joseph Stiglitz came out with this. He's been talking about it, the Nobel Award-winning economist, about not measuring our success by GDP anymore, and that we have to measure it more in terms of quality of life and how we're living our lives. And that's a direction we need to go in, and we agree with him wholeheartedly. But if they keep going and robbing the public blind as they are, it's going to turn in a way that it shouldn't go. And there are a lot of talk show hosts out there and media celebrities that are hijacking the revolution for their own ratings and their own needs of power. Because this isn't about, a bunch of right-wing nuts or conservative fringe elements. This is about angry people that no longer want to pay for government's excesses. So that's what we see happening.
What were your thoughts, Gerald, when you saw the live coverage of the protest march on Washington less than 2 weeks ago and you saw the crowds and the president cut out of town, and many members of Congress cut out of town, and they turned a lot of the cameras off that, of course, are on, right, to watch out for terrorist activity, but they had some of them off. What were your thoughts as you saw that unfold? I know you predicted this, but I'm asking to get in the mind of Gerald Celente now. What were your thoughts when you saw that live?
I thought of France, and I thought of how the nobility and the royalty pretended it didn't happen. Again, current events form future trends. Pick up USA Today on September 13th, the day after. Pick up the New York Times the day after. They showed a little picture, a little photo, the Sunday New York Times. They had a photo at the bottom of the page, and the story was covered, I think, on page 37. On the inside, way back, buried. And the media marginalized it. And again, that was the example of where there, just as when they had the riots in Seattle against World Trade several years ago, they focused in on the anarchists, if they were anarchists or plants, who knows, that was smashing windows and negating the fact of all of the people that are vehemently opposed to the globalization for other reasons. And that's what they did. That was my feeling in the coverage of the September 12th protests in Washington, D.C. Eric, it was the fourth shot of the Second American Revolution. The first one was April 15th with the Tea Parties and protests. The second one was on 4th of July when rallies all over the country against taxation without representation. The third shot was when people protested to their congressmen at town hall meetings against Obamacare. It had less to do with health care and more to do with government encroachment and the people understanding that anything that the government does, they're going to come up on the short end of the stick. And the fourth shot fired was the September 12th protest in D.C.
When congressional members, Gerald, have asked the Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke to quote from the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, which is being trashed right now, right? But to quote from there, what gives the Fed the powers, quoting the Constitution, to engage in and do what it is that they are actively doing? It seems to me the response is, well, Congress has empowered us to do what we're engaging in or to do what it is that we're doing. Something seems wrong with that. And what about the Federal Reserve and the fact that when you look at the Constitution, there doesn't seem to be much allowance for the existence of this non-governmental body that's privately owned and probably has European tentacles?
Well, it's very clear in the Constitution. It's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5. Congress has the sole authority to print and regulate the supply of money. And from what I was taught in school, the Constitution had to be amended. And the Federal Reserve Act was pushed through, as I'm sure your listeners well know, on Christmas Eve in 1913, when, it was horse and buggy days. No one was in Washington. So I always ask the same question over and over. This is illegal, according to the Constitution. Why isn't it being prosecuted as such? Who is this group of people? Who anointed them? And as everyone knows, again, that listens to your show, the educated ones that are familiar with the history, this was a major issue of this country since its inception, about foreign bankers hijacking the nation. And they have. Wall Street's hijacked Washington. I mean, who's our Treasury Secretary? Oh, the former president of the New York Federal Reserve Bank? What, am I, an imbecile? Who was the guy before him that was the Treasury Secretary? Henry Paulson, the former CEO of Goldman Sachs? What, am I, stupid? I mean, come on. Oh, there's a firewall. Yeah, there's a firewall. There's a firewall, there's Santa Claus, and there's a tooth fairy. I mean, how could people believe this cheap trick? And they're robbing the nation. And here's my greatest fear, Eric. They become so emboldened to steal as much as they want, and they're failing. It's going to fail because you can't print phantom money out of thin air backed by nothing. The whole system's going to collapse. What we fear is that after they do that, and considering the track record of the banksters and the gangsters, they're going to take the nation to war. And they may either do it under a false flag pretense. Remember the Maine, Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda, the Gulf of Tonkin, or it may be real. But they're going to do something, and that's what we fear the most, is that the criminals, because money junkies don't care, the addicts. An addict will do anything. They have no bonds, no bounds, no family loyalties or loyalties to friends. They'll do anything they want to do to get their money fix. So we're concerned that the next fix is to fix it permanently and take this country to war to satisfy their greed and need.
I'm sticking on this point for just a minute, Gerald. We've had a Federal Reserve before in the United States, as you know, called the U.S. Bank. And people had to revolt and violence, and led by President Andrew Jackson, had to remove the U.S. Bank from existence and give power back to the Treasury, as you said. Are we looking at a situation where you see in the future the citizens wanting to eliminate the Federal Reserve?
Not only eliminate the Federal Reserve, but eliminate the federal government. We could see these secessionist movements gaining more and more strength. We can see the United States becoming like the former Soviet Union. Now it's the USSA, United States of Soviet America, and it could be break up just like the USSR did. We see that happening. How could any thinking adult, how could anybody that has any dignity or respect for themselves look up to people like Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, Bonner,